Have you ever stopped yourself from saying something helpful to someone because you were afraid that it might come across as being judgmental? Have you ever lost a friend or a coworker because you tried to help them with some kind of sin problem, but they saw it as finger pointing or as being judgmental? And what does the Bible say about judging others or about being judgmental? How do you truly help someone improve their lives without coming across as judgmental? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Orozco, and welcome to my channel, a place where we think out loud about the Bible and how its teachings have an impact on our lives. If that sounds interesting to you, be sure to hit the subscribe button and check back regularly. Okay, survey after survey indicates that Christians have a reputation of being judgmental. A 2007 Barna Research report revealed that a majority of young people in America describe modern-day Christians as judgmental, hypocritical, and anti-gay. In fact, those are the three descriptors that come back in research after research. The Christians are anti-gay, hypocritical, and judgmental. David Kinnaman, Barna Group president and author of the book Unchristian, What a New Generation Really Thinks About Christianity, writes this. He says the anti-homosexual perception has now become sort of the Geiger counter of a Christian's ability to love and work with people. These same views were actually held, although smaller percentages, by active churchgoers. 80% of churchgoers agreed with the anti-gay label. 52% of churchgoers said Christianity is judgmental, and a whopping 47% of churchgoers declared it hypocritical. Kinnaman said one of the biggest surprises for researchers was the extent to which non-Christians, 1 in 4, said that modern-day Christianity is no longer like Jesus. Jesus they like, us, not so much. So there are three questions I want to address then. The first is, what does the Bible say about judging or being judgmental? We think out loud about the Bible, so let's start with the Bible. What does the Bible say? Number two, is this perception about Christians true? Is it correct, or is it a misperception? And number three, if it's true, what can we do about it? How can we help people with their very real sin problems without being perceived as being judgmental? So let's start with the Bible. What does the Bible say? Well, the consistent message of the Bible is that no human being is in any position to judge another human being or to be judgmental. The Bible has a consistent negative opinion of those who are judgmental. There are numerous morality tales, cautionary tales, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that warn against being judgmental. In the Old Testament, you have the book of Jonah, you have the book of Job, both written to combat this idea of judgmentalism, and peppered throughout the Old Testament are cautionary tales about being careful in how you judge others. And the New Testament is just as hard on those who are judgmental. In fact, it is the defining characteristic of the main foils to Jesus in the Gospels, the Pharisees. The name Pharisee has become synonymous with the hypocrisy and judgmentalism, and Jesus reserved his harshest criticism for the hypocrisy and the judgmentalism of the Pharisees. So let me go to three places that Jesus condemns judgmentalism. It's all throughout Scripture. I could go to Paul, I could go to Peter, but I choose these three because they are representative, but also because each one has an important underlying theological basis for the Bible's disdain for judging. So the first is the most direct. It's Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 2, straight from the lips of Jesus. And Jesus says this, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it will be measured to you." So pretty straightforward. He drives his point home with an illustration about a speck and a log. He says, how can you go and try to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye when you have a big log in your own eyes? That little parable is meant to say, you're in no position to judge anyone. Whatever you're judging them of, you're just as guilty as they are. So here Jesus connects judging with hypocrisy and ties them together in this inextricable way. Every moment of judgmentalism is at the same time a moment of hypocrisy. And the underlying theological principle is that we are all sinners, and not a single one of us is in a position to judge. We are all just as guilty as the ones we are judging. Our sins may be different from theirs, but we're all the same. So that's the first principle. Now, the second place I want to take you with Jesus is a parable that Jesus told in Matthew chapter 26. It's a parable about a man who sowed good seed in a field, and the crops began to grow. But his servants come to him one day and say, did you not sow good seed? And the man said, yes. And they said, well, then why are there weeds? There are weeds everywhere. And the man said, oh, this was the evil one. He came in the middle of the night and he planted weeds. And the servant said, do you want us to pull the weeds up? And the farmer said, no, leave them alone. He said, because in pulling up the weeds, you're going to accidentally pull up some of the good stuff with them. He said, wait till the harvest. After the harvest, the master will be able to tell, and he'll divide the weeds from the wheat. Now, here's the point of the story. It is that we are not the ones that are going to be pulling weeds because we're lousy at it. The farmer says, no, don't pull the weeds. You're terrible at that. You don't know how to do it. You see, the underlying principle here is that we must not judge because we're terrible at it. We have myopic vision. We always judge subjectively with limited knowledge and limited information. We have no tools with which to judge fairly or impartially. It's literally impossible for us to do it. We don't have a platform to stand on that is a completely objective platform because our vision is so finite. So we get it wrong a lot. He says, stop pulling weeds. Don't pull the weeds. You don't know how to pull weeds. You're lousy at it. Okay? That's theological principle number 2. The third is the strongest and most direct, and it's Jesus' rant against the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 23. I'm just going to read 2 verses of it. It's the whole chapter. He goes long on this, but let me just read 2 verses that are representative of what he's saying. Verses 13 and following. He says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Pretty strong words, right? But the undergirding theological principle is that when we act with judgmentalism, we actually do the opposite of what we're trying to do. We push people away from God. We push people away from the gospel message. We push people away from all that is good in life. We destroy the gospel that is built on grace and grace alone when we move in with judgmentalism. So there's the Bible's take on judgmentalism, and it's based on those 3 big theological ideas: that we are all sinners and have no right to judge, that we're lousy at it, and that judging actually pushes people away from the gospel message. So that's what the Bible says. So now the second question: is it true what people are saying about us? Are Christians really judgmental? Well, the limited research that has been done so far seems to indicate that it is true, that we are or tend to be judgmental. A 2013 Barna Group study examines the degree to which this perception may be accurate. The study explores how well Christians seem to emulate the actions and attitudes of Jesus in their interaction with others. In this nationwide study of self-identified Christians, the goal was to determine whether Christians have the actions and attitudes of Jesus as they interact with others, or if they are more akin to the beliefs and behaviors and actions of the Pharisees. Now, in order to do this, the Barna Research Group presented a series of 20 agree or disagree statements. And they divided this into actions and attitudes. The actions of Jesus, the attitudes of Jesus, the actions of the Pharisees, and the attitudes of the Pharisees. That's the way the questions were designed. So I don't have time to go into all of the research. I've provided a link in the description below to the actual research. You can nerd out on it for hours and hours like I did if you want to. But let me just give you a basic summary. Using these 20 questions as the basis of their analysis, the researchers created an aggregate score for each individual and then placed those results into one of 4 categories, or quadrants, if you will. The 4 quadrants are: quadrant number 1, Christ-like in action and attitude. That's the quadrant you want to be in. Both in attitude and action, you're like Jesus. Quadrant number 2, Christ-like in action, but not in attitude. In other words, you're doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons or with the wrong attitude. Quadrant number 3, Christ-like in attitude, but not action. This is the hypocrisy quadrant. You're pretending to have the right attitude, but the action is not following. And then the 4th quadrant, Christ-like in neither attitude nor in actions. This is the full-blown Pharisee quadrant. You don't want to be there. The findings reveal that most self-identified Christians in the U.S. are characterized by having the attitudes and actions researchers identified as Pharisaical. Just over half of the nation's Christians qualify for this category, 51%. 51% of Christians tend to have attitudes and actions that are characterized by self-righteousness, hypocrisy, and judgment. On the other end of the spectrum, only 14% of self-identified Christians, just 1 out of every 7, seems to represent both the actions and the attitudes of Jesus Christ, that quadrant we all want to be in. Now, in the middle are those who have some kind of mix of action and attitudes. About 1/5 of Christians are Christ-like in attitude, but often represent pharisaical actions. Another 14% tend to be defined as Christ-like in action, but seem to be motivated by self-righteous or hypocritical attitudes. Evangelicals are notably different from the norms in 2 ways. First, they were slightly more likely than other Christians to be Christ-like in action and in attitude. That's good news. However, among those who were in the middle, had a mix in this so-called jumbled actions and attitudes, evangelicals are the only faith group more likely to be pharisaical in attitude, but Christ-like in action. Let me say that again. The only faith group more likely to be pharisaical in attitude, but Christ-like in action. In other words, evangelicals tend to do the right thing, but for the wrong reasons or with the wrong attitude. Kinnaman explains it this way. He says, this research may help to explain how evangelicals are often targeted for claims of hypocrisy. The unique sin of evangelicals tends to be doing the right thing, but with improper motives. So there you have it. The research seems to say it's true. So the question now, the third question, what can we do? How do we help people with their very real sin problems without coming across as being judgmental? The Bible tells us that we're to help people. The Bible wants us to help people with their sin problem. The Bible tells us to be discerning about spiritual problems in the world and spiritual matters. We are to discern what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. That's important. So how do we do that and not come across as being judgmental? Well, step number 1 is to recognize your judgmental thoughts. Own them. Realize or recognize, become self-aware. Know that you are having these self-righteous, judgmental thoughts. It's natural. It's normal. It's human behavior. You have them. Recognize that. Own them. Recognize them for what they are. So let me just give you a few examples. You might be judgmental if you jump to negative moral conclusions about others. Like you run right away to the moral conclusion. Or you have a moral rating system that is skewed in your own favor. In other words, you believe the worst in others, but the best in yourself. Or if you move very quickly to this action is morally wrong. These are the black and white people. Say, this person is morally corrupt. This person is a mess, right? If you go from their moral action being wrong to them being wrong, something's wrong with them, right? Or when you decide that what someone did was wrong, when you don't even know much about the context of that person's behavior. So here's what you do with those thoughts, is that you call them what they are. As soon as you get the thought, you call it what it is, and then you can begin to manage it. But the first step is to name it. And the second step, step number 2, is manage your judgment using what I'm going to call OPAL, O-P-A-L. It's an acronym. Each letter stands for something. Manage your judgment using OPAL. So the O stands for observe. Observe what is happening and don't pass judgment. Be the fly on the wall that's just watching it happen, watching it unfold. Just listening to the person's story without any judgment. Just observe. Focus on observing and not on judging. O. The P in OPAL stands for place yourself in their shoes and try to understand them. Walk a mile in their shoes. Get a little background story. Get to know them. Get to understand them. What drives them? What motivates them? What are the things in their past that are impacting them? So place yourself in their shoes. O, P, and then A. The A stands for accept that person for who they are without trying to change them. It is not your job to change them. You don't have the power to change them. All you're going to do is drive them away. Accept that person for who they are. That does not necessarily mean that you accept their behavior or their bad behavior. It does not necessarily mean that you accept their sin, but you accept them for who they are. And your primary goal is not to change them. Your primary goal is the last letter in the acronym, OPAL, O-P-A-L, and L is for love. Love them, or at least try to love them, even if you don't understand them. Listen, I know that's not easy. It's not easy to do, but it's so important if you're ever going to get to the place where you can really help someone without them feeling like you're judging them. You have to go through this acronym OPAL. Observe, place yourself in their shoes, accept them where they are without trying to change them, and love them, or at least try to love them, even if you don't understand them. This is the way you manage your judgment through this process as you're developing the relationship. Now, step number 3 is create a safe, non-judgmental space. You manage this by asking yourself a series of questions as soon as the intrusive judgmental thought hits your brain. Here's some questions you can try. Question number 1, am I putting my expectations for myself onto this person? Question number 2, have I had a similar experience to what they're experiencing? And how did it make me feel? Right? This is a process of putting yourself into their shoes. Identify with them. Question number 3, am I projecting my own anger or my own issues or my own baggage onto this person or onto this situation? Right? This is where I've told you we have no place to stand to be completely objective. Every one of our experiences is playing into how we act or react with other people. So you need to ask yourself these questions to become self-aware and to gain a deeper understanding of their situation. These are the questions you ask to create a safe place, a non-judgmental place for them. Now, here are the ways that you do this, some very specific action steps you can take. Number 1 is be a safe place for them and listen to them without responding with judgment or with advice or with solutions. Solutions can come later. Just listen and hold this space for them. 2 is let the other person vent. Give them this safe place where they can vent and work through their anger or their issues or their problems. Practice empathy, and it does take practice. Help them to name their feelings. Ask them, how does that make you feel? Or how are you feeling? And 5th, let them know that they're important. Validate their experience. Validate their feelings, that what they're feeling, what they're experiencing is a very real thing. And most of the time, their reaction is a very normal reaction. Let them know that they are important to you by assigning value to them and value to their experience. You don't want to cut the person off when they're trying to talk. You don't want to tell them just like to get over it, simplistic kind of platitudes. You don't want to make them feel guilty about what they're feeling. You don't want to make the conversation about you, or you turn it all about your experiences or your problems. You want to create this safe place where they can find a listening ear and some validation for what they're feeling, where they can be made to feel important. Look, this is obviously a difficult one for all of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this reputation in the culture for being hypocritical and judgmental, anti this and anti that. We're known more for what we're against than what we're for. And there are no easy and quick solutions to this. If you genuinely want to help people without judging them, then you're going to have to invest a lot of time on that relationship with them and get good at the non-judging, non-advice giving skills before you ever get to the place where you can help them with advice or solutions. You see, we tend to move quickly to advice and solutions because we know how to do that. But it's the non-advice giving skills, it's the non-judging skills that we need to work on and that we need to start with. Listen, if you want to help people, seriously help people with their sin problems without judging them, then it's going to take time. This is an investment of time. And just as a side note, I want to let you know that sometimes you might have to say, I can't do this. I can't help this person. Maybe you don't have the time at that moment. You don't have the energy. You don't have the bandwidth to help them the way they truly need it. What they really need from you, you just can't give them. And anything you try to do in that situation will just short circuit the process and end up feeling like you're judging them. It'll end up pushing them away more than helping them. So there may be a point where you have to just say to them, I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this right now. And that's okay. Don't feel guilty about that. Because when you are going to help people with their sin problems without coming across as judging, you're going to have to invest a lot of time at the front end, building the trust, building the relationship, creating this safe place where they know they can come and they can receive the wisdom that God is giving you for them. But let me tell you something, they're worth it. They are worth the time investment. So I hope this has been helpful. If it has, be sure and hit the subscribe button and keep coming back to my channel where I drop a video every week, usually around Tuesday, that is just taking the Bible and thinking out loud about the Bible and the way it impacts our lives today. So I hope you keep coming back, and I hope that God blesses you as you continue to live for Him and serve Him every day of your life. God bless you.